Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about inspiring and empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to rekindle that fire in your belly so that you can step back into life with more clarity, purpose, and excitement. Today, I am so excited to be welcoming back Jules Galloway. Jules was part of our previous series. She's so good, she had to come back again. For those of you that don't know Jules, she is a rocket naturopath, a podcaster, and your big piece of your work is traveling overseas and doing all this amazing work in other countries. So we're going to dive into that as well. But first up, Jules, for the mums that don't know you, can you take a little bit of time to introduce who you are and how you came to be doing the work that you do?
Ooh, that's a long and convoluted road. And firstly, thank you so much for having me back. It's so exciting to be back again for another series. Okay, where do we start? Well, I've been a naturopath for 13 years.
Yep.
I'm originally from Melbourne.
Yep.
And I managed to burn myself the F out in Melbourne doing what people in big cities do, trying to juggle corporate life and personal life and social life and not eating well. And I ended up in Byron Bay.
Yep.
And I've been up here for 8 years now, nearly, and absolutely life-changing move, best thing I ever did. But up here there wasn't much work around, and I ended up starting an online business because there just wasn't anything going on locally. So I see patients now via Skype mostly, and even though we are opening a bricks and mortar dispensary up here in a few days. But yeah, I do see people mostly via Skype. I have online programs, and what I noticed is I started to attract women who were going through what I'd been through.
Yep.
So I was like, why am I getting all these women who are 35 to 40 years old? They've got burnout. Their adrenals are have been getting pumped forever. Their cortisol's all over the shop. They've got anxiety, depression, hormonal imbalances, thyroid stuff. I'm like, I kept attracting clients who were basically me 5 to 10 years ago.
Yep.
So most of what I do now is help, be the helper that I needed when I was going through it, and giving people the thing that I would have needed most when I was going through it. So I get women eating well. I get them eating gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, whole foods, all that sort of stuff. I teach them how to relieve stress and help their bodies adapt to stress. And then, of course, I help them out with beautiful herbs and supplements, which is amazing, and one of the most fun parts of my job. So that once that all was humming along nicely, that took a few years to build up.
Yeah.
But once all that was humming along nicely up here, I've always had this intense burning desire to give back. And so it had been in the back of my mind since I was 16 years old. I was homeless, and I was at one point things were pretty bad. Like, they were to the point where I got charity handouts from organisations like the Smith family. So things were pretty bad. And then I remember when people were helping me as a homeless 16-year-old, I remember thinking, one day I will pay this back. But if essentially what that's turned into is, one day I'll pay this forward. And so I always knew that even if it took a couple of decades, at some point when my life was going really well, I knew there would come a time that I wanted to give back. And that opportunity came up in 2017 when I found out about an organisation called Involvement Volunteers International. So I'm pretty sure we'll be talking about some of that stuff today. So now I balance my clinic, my clinic patients. I will soon be balancing that with a hopefully thriving naturopathic dispensary and apothecary here in Byron Bay. And I balance that with a marriage, and I also balance that with proper self-care and time out, because if I don't practice what I preach, A, I'd be a hypocrite, and B, I'd fall apart. And yeah, and now I work for Involvement Volunteers International, taking groups of volunteers overseas to work on medical and nutrition projects. So that's me in a nutshell, in a macadamia nutshell.
I was saying before we hit record, there's so much of the energy around trying to get ourselves feeling better and all the things that we want to do for ourselves. I really would love to dive more into that idea of focusing out and just how incredibly powerful it is on our well-being. We can make it as simple as a little gift that we do, or a meal, or something that we do for somebody else, and how good that makes us feel. But the work that you're doing is taking it to a substantially different level. So can we dive into that a bit more? So when you go to Fiji and you're in Greece as well, where else are you going?
It started with a trip to Greece. That was the first time I was involved with Involvement Volunteers International.
Yeah.
And that was one trip that they set up because one of the directors of IVI is a naturopath. Her name's Lauren Lacey. She's an absolute legend. So I saw a call out in a naturopathic group, like one of those Facebook forums, and I noticed they had this epic team of they were aiming to take over 40 health practitioners, but from all modalities. Mm-hmm. So they had nurses, doctors, naturopaths, nutritionists, physiotherapists, dietitians. They put the call out to everyone. And then they were going to turn it into this great big healthcare soup and send them out to help in the hope that we can all find common ground and work together, which is my idea of utopia, right? So I thought that sounded amazing, and I crowdfunded my way there, and then off I went to Greece, and we worked in the refugee camps there, so mainly working with people who were fleeing war-torn countries, mostly Syria, some Afghanistan, and other places. It did turn into more general volunteering that time, with only a little bit of sort of nutrition and medical volunteering, but I was lucky enough to work with the director of IVI, Lauren, quite closely, because we split up into several teams, and I was on her team for a lot of the trip. And so we became quite close. She lives an hour up the road from me on the Gold Coast. And so we've been friends ever since. And then halfway through 2017, it was July 2017, she rang me and she's like, Jules, we're thinking of starting a nutrition project in Fiji. I'm like, yeah. She's like, I was wondering if you would be available to lead it. We've got one other volunteer who wants to go, and we thought she's a very, very fresh newbie naturopath, straight out of college, and we need to send someone with her as a supervisor. And perhaps you could have a bit of a sniff around while you were there, suss out whether we can do more things, see it as a bit of a recon mission. And I was like, yeah, cool, that sounds great. When does it happen? She's like, yeah, 3 weeks from now. And I'm like, sure. So luckily at the time I had an online business, so it wasn't hard. I just went, cool, let's do this. And so over I went to Fiji with one other practitioner, and in that particular trip we really did a lot of groundwork for what was to come. But what was to come was partnering with businesses over there, who we actually partner with the Sheraton Marriott Starwood chain now. So we do the Western Sheraton Marriott hotels. So we actually now go into the hotels. We set up for a few days like a little clinic, and we do health checks there on all the staff. But then what that gets us is access into a lot of the villages as well, because all the staff, or they call them associates, all the associates who come to us for health checks usually live in the nearby village, unless they live out the back. Some of the resorts like Sheraton Tokariki, that's an island, and they literally live on the island behind the resort, and then just take a boat home for their days off. But most of the other resorts we do, they go back to their village at the end of the day. And so through doing some of the corporate work, we got access to more and more villages. So now we split our time there doing health checks and education with the workers, the associates there. And then we go and do community outreach, health checks and education in the villages. And what we found is that 1 in 3 people in Fiji have diabetes, which is incredible statistic. They're number 1 in the world. They actually, they made the newspaper over there. So we've actually got the newspaper cutting that we show them now. from their own newspaper saying that they are #1 in the world for diabetes. They've beaten America, they've beaten Australia, they've beaten Samoa, they've beaten everyone. And we're like, look, yeah, and we go in and we do these educational talks now, and the way we start the educational talks is we say, hey, we know you guys are #1 in the world for rugby sevens, and they all go, yeah, and we go, well, you're also #1 in the world for diabetes, and they're like, So, yeah, there's a lot of overweight people there. We've seen blood pressure and blood sugars that I never would have seen in clinical practice here. Like we come across a lot of sick people. We triage them out to hospitals and we take them to the doctor, and we try and get them the help that they need. But we found that a lot of people in the villages especially just don't get screening. So although we're doing education and teaching people what to eat as part of our work there, we're also screening them. So we actually measure their blood sugar, we measure their blood pressure, and anyone who's high, we take them through a process of, okay, now this, your blood pressure is 200/90, so we need to do something about this quite urgently. Okay, where's the nearest doctor? Yeah. How can we get you there? Like, we've put people in ambulances before, paid for the ambulance, just, get them the help that they need. We've put people on boats to get them from remote islands back to the hospital on the mainland to get them the help that they need. We liaise with local nurses, village nurses. We liaise with some of the local doctors over there and get people to see the doctor. And we even had one doctor say, oh, thank goodness you're here, that I've been trying to get these people to come and see me for 6 months. And we're like, we just put them in the car. But yeah, there's a lot of creativity that's involved once you're over there, and you come across people who do need urgent assistance, because and also the first thing you have to do is convince them that it is urgent assistance that they need. You don't even go to the doctor now. So yeah, it's now grown. Long story short, you can tell I'm quite passionate about it, right? But long story short, it started with just myself and one other naturopath going over there for a quick recon mission, and now it has blown out to 4 trips a year to Fiji, and the group size is sort of 8 to 12, 13. I think our biggest group size ever was 13. And then we also now have 2 trips a year scheduled to go to 2 to Vanuatu and 2 to Samoa. So we're now starting to see is we're getting results in Fiji, so we can then approach other South Pacific countries who have similar problems and similar food and similar populations, and we say, listen, this is what has worked for us in Fiji. Would you like us to come and do it for you? So yeah, now it's grown into 8 trips a year all up. We've got myself as one of the coordinators, but we've also put on a couple of other coordinators because I can't do all the trips. There's no way. And it's huge now. And I haven't seen the latest count, but we do thousands of health checks now, which is really exciting.
It's phenomenal. So the diabetes rate is the result of these remote islands relying on food that's coming in for the resorts, or where are they getting supply? Where is it coming from?
There's 2 things going on over there, right? You've got the food coming into the resorts.
Yeah.
2, you've got the food that the staff are eating, and the 2 don't mix. So what you see at your buffet at your fancy resort in Fiji, most of that is brought into Fiji from overseas, or is grown or made in Fiji, but is quite expensive and kind of rare. The typical diet in Fiji is, if they're in an area that's near a bakery, bread, toast for breakfast. There's a lot of wheat bix that goes down, powdered milk if they don't have refrigeration, because a lot of the places we've been to don't even have a fridge in the house. So they'll make powdered milk with their wheat bix. And they feed us fruit for breakfast, but honestly, the locals don't seem to eat as much of it. But they know we love it, so they always give us fruit for breakfast. But we went to one of the resorts. This is how it started, actually. we were doing this island called Yonuya. We were there for like 4 or 5 days, working, at the school, we were volunteering, teaching the kids about nutrition, doing health checks on the teachers, getting in to see some of the villagers who lived nearby. And it's a tiny little island, but opposite that island, there's an island called Tokariki, and Tokariki is a Sheraton resort, okay? And we actually got invited. They said, would you like to come over to the resort for 1 day to do health checks on our stuff? And we were like, yeah, that sounds fun. So over we went on a little boat, and we did health checks for this 1 day. And what we found there was really astounding, that I think it was like 20% of the stuff that we checked had like high blood pressure, and 20% had high blood glucose. I forget the exact amounts now, but we saw blood pressures over 200. We were like, we need to sort this out. And then we were talking to them, like health practitioners do, going, okay, what are you eating? What do you eat? Maybe we can talk to you about changing your diet. And they're like, oh yeah, we have the cake for breakfast. And we're like, the cake? What is the cake? They're like, oh, we have the cake for breakfast. Come and see. So they showed us what they were eating for breakfast, and they were eating, each piece of cake was the size of a lamington. So we're talking a big, thick chunk of cake. It's vanilla cake with custard on the top. And each person had 3 pieces of cake for breakfast. And then there was this tiny little cup, looked like about 150 ml plastic cup, that had a little bit of fruit in it. So basically they had 3 massive pieces of cake with custard on top and half a cup of fruit. And that was everyone's breakfast. And we said, okay, well, maybe can we swap this for something else that's got a bit more nutrition, like maybe even some eggs on some whole grain toast? And they're like, no, all we get is cake. And I was like, beep, 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 beep. And that's how it started, because we ended up contacting Fiji Resort, the management of the Sheraton Resort, and they were like, we had no idea, because they had subcontractors in the mess hall feeding the staff. And they were like, we had no idea that's what they were being given for breakfast. And they were like, can you help us change it? So then they got us to help suggest other things that we could put on a breakfast menu. Then we looked at their lunch, and their lunch were, it was like casseroles or curries and things, and they weren't too bad. But what we were seeing is this much rice with this much casserole. So there's just it's a carb and sugar fest over there. And even the casserole would have a few veggies in it, but like a really tiny amount of protein. And so very high carb diet, very high sugar diet, very low protein diet, definitely not enough fresh veggies and greens. And, especially in areas that can't afford, good quality protein, like you have to work with what you've got over there as well. And some of the communities, like if you just said, oh, you need to have a palm-sized portion of meat with every meal, like I would say to a client here, they literally can't afford that. So we had to work with what we had. But yeah, it is just a carbohydrate fest. And they're drinking this juice. They call it juice. It's not juice, right? It's soft drink. It's flat soft drink, right? It's pretending to be juice, and it's got on the label, I wish I had one to show you. On the label, it's called Juicy, Jucy, and then it's got a picture of an orange with a drop of juice coming out with like a picture of a palm tree behind it. It all looks really healthy. And then you turn the bottle over, and on the back it says, made in Fiji by Coca-Cola Amatil. And we were like, "Argh!" And we had a look, and it was exactly the same amount of sugar in one serve of Juicy that you would find in Coca-Cola or similar sort of soft drink. So now what we do is we educate people. Like we literally go in and we say to people, this is not juice. And we were very, very lucky that Damon Gummo, who made that sugar film, lives in my town, right? And my husband actually knows him and bailed him up and said, my wife's doing this project, and, is there anything that you can offer or suggest to her? And they gave us copies of the movie to take over there and everything. But the one thing they said to us that stuck and was the most helpful thing ever was they said, get the product, like the bottle of Juicy, find out how much sugar is in it, and then take that amount of cane sugar and put it in a Ziploc bag.
Show them.
And then write on the Ziploc bag, juicy, and then how many teaspoons of sugar, because everyone knows what a teaspoon is, right? And people might not know what a gram is, like what implications are. Everyone knows a teaspoon, right? So we'd go juicy, 21 teaspoons of sugar or whatever it was. And then we actually lay it out on the table. So we'll have the product and the Ziploc bag, and another product and the Ziploc bag. So we'd have tin of baked beans and then 8 teaspoons of sugar in a Ziploc bag. And so we'd have it all set out on a table. And we do presentations now where we play games with people so they have to guess which bag of sugar belongs to which product, etc. But yeah, like that's where we're at over there. Like, they're being told that things are healthy, and we know they're not. We know they're contributing to the diabetic problem.
Yeah. Do you know, I've had this conversation before about how, we hear these stories and we get so horrified, and predominantly we hear about what's going on in America and obesity and diabetes and all these things. What's going on here in Australia, it's not much better. In fact, I think, our obesity rates and diabetes rates are actually higher per head of capita than America. And so you have those statistics about what's going on in Fiji, and it sounds horrific. But what's going on here, and I know because my son has just been away on a 4-day camp with Scouts, and then there was an Anzac Day service and breakfast just a few days after that, and I am looking at what they are eating, and it just is so infuriating. And having been doing this for nearly 20 years, my oldest son's 20 now, I honestly run into roadblocks about how to have these conversations, because 99% of the people in the groups that I'm talking to just look at me like, oh. Here we go, another health nutter.
That means 1%'s listening, though. That's good.
Oh, I know. But I know it is frustrating. And our, the white bread and the cordial and the wheat bix and I actually shared a post on my Facebook page the other day that was one of those triggering, like button pushing posts. It was like, there is no excuse anymore. There is so much information now available. How much more needs to happen to get this message out? But
that information is out there, but unless someone knows where to look, they're not seeing it. What I've realized in the last few years is that you and I and all our mates live in a bubble, right? Yeah. Okay. It's like when an Ayurvedic friend of mine was about to put out an ebook or something she was about to put out, and she actually said, everyone knows what oil pulling is, right? So if I just put in my book, if I talk about oil pulling in the book, everyone knows what oil pulling is, right? I don't have to explain that you put oil in your mouth and you swish it around, you draw it through your teeth or whatever. She's like, I can just say oil pulling, right? And we're like, yeah. And then someone in our group piped up and said, you should ask someone outside of Byron Bay. Right? Because it was a Byron Bay group for business women. And someone said, you need to go and ask some people who don't live in the bubble. And sure enough, she went and asked some people who didn't live in the bubble. No one knew what oil pulling was. Even though there's information out there that tells you about oil pulling, they'd never come across it. And what I realized from my experience with the juice companies in Fiji is that, like, they have internet over there, right? They're educated. They can read. They've got great English skills, right? They've got the internet. So technically speaking, they have access to information about sugar, about diet, about all of that stuff. But while there's food companies who've got a lot of money and a lot of corporate power, who are telling people that something is healthy, there's a great majority of people who are just going to take that at face value and not look into it. And so if you come back to Australia and you translate that to Australia and you go outside your bubble, right? Go outside your bubble and go to somewhere you've never been, right? And then realize that there are people out there who think that the best breakfast choice for their children is Nutri-Grain because it's Ironman food, and they can put milk with it because it's good for calcium for their bones. Yeah. And their kids are getting sugar highs and lows, and they're snotty as all get up, and mum doesn't put or dad doesn't put 2 and 2 together because they've been told that this is the healthy choice, right? And they take that at face value and move on because they're busy and they believe what they're told. And that doesn't mean that they're any less smart for believing it and moving on. Like if someone tells me something about something I don't know about, like if someone goes upstairs and checks my plumbing and tells me my plumbing's fine, I'm going to believe them.
Yeah.
Right? So people are busy, and while you've got the power and the money in the hands of the food companies, I mean, it just means that people in this bubble who understand what people should be eating, right? People in this bubble need to be louder, and even if only 1% of the room's listening, I absolutely passionately believe that we still need to try and get the message across, and we speak to that 1% and get that 1% to tell their friends.
Yeah.
Because it's so important. But it's a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I hate to think that I sound condescending when I say that. I don't mean to be condescending when I'm talking about these groups at Scouts or football clubs or netball clubs or, all these different places that I've come across this issue. The frustration just wells up when I see these kids that are unwell, and they can't, this mentality that we can't get through a primary school game of football without having lolly snakes or oranges at half time because everyone's going to drop dead from low blood sugar. It's madness. It is madness.
It is. But unfortunately, until we have every doctor on board and every dietitian on board and every government body on board, all agreeing that there's better option out there, right? Then we're going to have, a bit of you're going to have two groups of people, the ones that, think that those things are healthy and that lolly snakes are fine as long as the colorings are natural, right? But they're natural ones, like, great. But if you also look at where we were 20 years ago to where we are now, there has been a massive shift. Yeah. And there will continue to be a massive shift. But some of us have to stick our necks out. And, this is why I really, really disagree with people, treating Pete Evans like a tall poppy. Because, love him or hate him, right? He is sticking his neck out and being a spokesperson for a healthier lifestyle. Now, whether you think people should give up grains altogether or whether you think, all of that aside, he's also advocating for people to eat better quality foods and more veggies. But there needs to be more people standing up and sticking their neck out, unfortunately, or just educating your friends and your family and your kids. If you educate your kids, that's a couple more people in the next generation that will have that information and who will have a healthy skepticism when it comes to food companies telling you that their food is healthy. And if you educate them about how to look into those things, I think, look, I do, when I grew up in the 80s, when I look at where the knowledge was back then and where it's at now, I know it's changed, but we're impatient and it's happening too slowly. And it's affecting kids right in front of our very eyes, and that it gets my goat too. Yeah.
Well, the change is happening slowly, but the rates of ill health are just skyrocketing. That's ones, they're not running in parallel.
I know. But some of that ill health is coming from other sources as well, such as more screen time and more stress and more pollution and more toxins, and there's so much going on. Let's not get too depressed though. Focus on the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we I'm just trying to think what's going to be the most useful way to take this interview from here. I do love that idea. We can get so caught up in all the things that we have to do for ourselves to try and maintain this wellness lifestyle. But let's go back to looking at the effects of focusing out and doing things for other people and how that actually affects our well-being, and also how some suggestions around how mums can start to implement things just in their local communities. I mean, you know, we'd all like to be coming to Fiji. We'll all be volunteering with you, Jules.
I'm not going to lie, it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Although sometimes it's pretty rugged where we stay. Like
Yeah.
it's definitely not all 5-star resorts. It definitely gets balanced out with some of the hardest days and some of the hardest nights I've ever experienced, and sleepless nights, and really, you know, living conditions that we're just not accustomed to here.
Yeah.
But the people are beautiful and it makes up for everything. They're so lovely.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't have to sign up to a 2-week trip to Fiji to do something good in the world. Like, it doesn't have to be that big. It can be something small but done with meaning. And I know that if you know, when friends have babies or when friends are sick, just stepping up and making them a casserole is sometimes like the best thing and the most meaningful thing that you can do. A friend of mine was a bit unwell recently, and she was going through a lot of stuff, and she needed to get a herb mix made, but I went and got it done for her and then drove it over to her place and hand delivered it so that she didn't have to. And, you know, she just thought that was the most wonderful thing anyone had done for her, which kind of made me a bit sad, because I kind of believe that we need to be doing that stuff for our friends and our neighbours and, you know, all the time. But sadly, we've just become so time poor and life is so hectic that sometimes we don't even have time to do those little things for people. You know, when a friend of mine was going through chemo, I made her like just a few meals. But again, she was just so grateful. But again, it kind of made me go, what I did was such a drop in the ocean. Like, why it's so sad that we don't have time to do these things. But I think if you want to start somewhere, start by helping someone close to you. Or, you know, it can be a friend or a neighbor who's having a hard time, and just do something for them. I think if you approach someone and say, hey, I know you're sick, or I know you've had a baby, or I know, you know, you're looking after your, you know, unwell parents at the moment, and if there's anything I can do, just let me know. They're not going to take up your offer, because it's a well-meaning offer, but it's not specific enough. But if you say to someone, I know you're having a hard time because of, you know, you're sick, or you've had a baby and you've got no sleep, or you're looking after elderly parents at the moment, I'm making you a casserole and bringing it over. What's a good time to drop it off? And is there anything that you don't eat? Right?
Yep.
So, and they'll say, oh, actually, I hate onions and I'm home at 6 p.m. tonight. Sick, right? Now I can do something to help you. So be specific in your offer so that people then can visualize what they're going to receive, and it's easier for them to say yes. Because if you just offer up your help, as well-meaning as it might be, if you say, oh, hey, is there anything I can do? Let me know, I'm here for you. They're like, oh, that's really lovely. That person's here for me. Yeah. But I don't want to bother them or put them out, so I'm not going to ask them for anything. It's nice to know they're there if I need them, if shit really hits the fan, but they're never going to call on you because they feel like you're really busy. But if you say, no, I've got time on my hands today, I've got way too many veggies in the fridge, I was about to whip up a big casserole and put some in the freezer for me, I'm bringing you some of it too. What time can drop it off?
It's done. Yeah. I'm thinking of that. There's a saying of courage comes. You need take action to find the courage. Courage doesn't come without taking action. And I think we can get so caught up. I mean, I'm thinking about the courage that it took to go to Fiji and start something so huge. But a lot of us feel like, you know, I'd love to make them something, but maybe they won't like it. And I don't know what taste everybody has. And, you know, we get so caught up in it not being perfect and exactly right, rather than in just, you know, in the act of doing something and just that faith, the faith of just taking
anxiety. It's just anxiety. So you just go, hey, anxiety, I recognize you, I see you. You're just being anxious because you're worried that someone's going to think your thing is shit. That's okay. We're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because the worst casserole ever is still better than no casserole at all, right? Or it might not be casserole. You might go over and clean someone's house for them, or I don't know, like offer to take their kids for a couple of hours so that they can go and have a massage, or whatever it is that is in your skill set. Because if you're a shit cook, go find something else, right? Don't force yourself to make a casserole if it feels like the worst day of your life. But you have something else in your skill set that you can do. All right, you might be an amazing cleaner, or you might want to wash and vacuum their car, so they get in the car and it just feels like they're having a holiday while they're in there, right? Or you might pick up their shopping for them, or, you know, ferry their kids to soccer for them. I don't know. Are people still allowed to do that? I don't know. So
without signed consent, yeah.
Get some disclaimers and waivers and, you know, a police check. I don't know. I was thinking with my Fiji brain where they just put 20 kids in the back of the ute and go. Don't have that there. But think of something that's in your skill set that you can do for them and offer it. And if they say no, don't take offense. Like maybe they just don't want anyone to come around that day, or maybe they don't need that thing. But give it a go. Like, because I'll tell you what, like if you do something nice for someone when they're feeling better and someone close to them needs something, they're going to be thinking about paying it forward. A bit like how when I got that handout from the Smith family when I was like 16 years old, right? And it wasn't even that much. It was just they paid an electricity bill because my electricity bill was going to get cut off, but it was like over $100. And back then that was huge for me. But you know, that was always then in the back of my head that one day I need to pay that forward. And now I get an opportunity to do that. So, you know, on another scale, like if you go and vacuum someone's house or help them out with their kids for a couple of hours, like the next time someone near them needs help, maybe they'll pay it forward. And that gets the whole society humming along again in the way that it was meant to. Because if it is one thing I learned by going to Fiji, it's that, you know, the old "it takes a village." Like that's actually happening over there. Like we met babies over there. We couldn't even figure out who the mum was, right? Because that baby was in everyone's arms all day long. Not just in their arms, but in their houses. So we'd go into one house and we're like, "Aren't you that baby from earlier?" And we're like, "Whose baby is that?" "Oh, no, it's not our baby." "All right, well, whose is it?" They're like, "Oh, no, she's at work today." And so, so like, awesome. It really does take a village over there. And do you know what? The mums are less exhausted, but the more affluent the family, the more exhausted the mum, because the less village life they had. So if you go into the cities in Fiji, right, where people have got more money, bigger houses, people are living separately rather than all together, and then suddenly the mums are more tired. Right? So we've lived in huts in villages that don't even have walls, like everyone's sleeping in one room. And we've lived in big houses in Fiji that are owned by very well-off families. Like when we do homestays there, we get like quite the spectrum. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that the more communal the living is, the less stressed and the less tired the mums were, because that kid was getting handed through like all the different aunties, and they're not even aunties, they're neighbours and I don't know who's who. So, but as soon as you isolate the families away from the community, suddenly the mums are tired and stressed. So do something for another mum if you've got the energy.
I think the flip side to that is say thank you and receive. You know, when somebody offers to do something for you, say yes, say thank you, and say yes, because that allows them to then ask you for a favour or to accept when you're giving to them. And as mums, we are shockers at accepting help. Shockers. So say yes.
As women, seriously, it's so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember being so sick when just after my marriage fell apart, my first marriage, and I had 4 children. My baby was 5 months old, 4 children under 8, and we were all sick, and I ended up so ill that I had to drive into hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning with tonsillitis because I couldn't even swallow my own spit. So I was dehydrated. It was just a hot mess. But the doctor wouldn't let me leave until I rang somebody and asked for help. I was like, oh,
Now there's a good doctor.
I was
There's a proper good
gagging.
doctor.
It was so hard to do. It was so hard to do. I ended up bringing a girlfriend. I was like, I'm so sorry. He won't let me leave. She's like, thank God you rang, woman. What on earth haven't you been doing asking for help? I was like, oh, I don't know.
And that's the other thing, right? How bad do you feel when a week, a month, or a year later you find out that someone you knew was going through something really awful and you didn't know, and therefore you didn't have an opportunity to offer them some help? And how awkward does that feel inside? And how bad does that feel inside that you are, I wish I'd known you were going through that because I could have helped, or I could have offered to help. So withholding that information from those people close to you isn't doing anyone any favors either.
No.
People want to help.
Yeah, they do. They do. So each of the speakers in the series is sharing with us their favorite morning. So I don't know if that's at home or in Fiji or some other glamorous location. But on a perfect morning, how do you love to start your day?
I have so many versions of perfect. Because is it the perfect morning where my husband's got the day off and we wake up slowly and we have snuggles with the dog and then a beautiful long breakfast followed by a surf or a dip in the ocean?
I thought you were going to say snuggles with your husband. I wasn't expecting you to throw in the dog.
I love my dog. Come on.
Yeah, good. All right. Sorry, I'll move along.
Or is it the perfect morning where you wake up in a beautiful place overseas and you've got purpose and someone's put you up somewhere, where you can see the ocean? I have so many. I'm a sampler in life. Like I'm always looking for new experiences. My idea of hell is actually doing the same thing over and over every single day. So my perfect morning probably usually would have some sort of variety to it, where I get something new, like a new location or a new country or new people. But honestly, I've been traveling so much in the last couple of years, and I've done so many trips overseas that lately, and I've been quite busy with this, birthing this new business, that lately, honestly, my idea of the perfect morning is where my husband and I are both home and we've got nowhere to be, and the coffee's good and the food's good and Byron Bay's turning on the sunshine, and then we go to the beach.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That piece about having a sense of purpose. I was actually having a conversation. One of my daughters is going to a different school that's not in our community. Everyone else has got back to school and she's still got a few days left on holiday, and I can just see her mood is diving into this. And I was like, if you don't get up, and I don't care if it's cleaning your room, doing the dishes, something, you've got to have something other than staring at a device. You've got to have a sense of purpose. Big.
It's huge.
Yeah, it is.
It's huge. I know in the past, a long time ago now, but in the past when I was between jobs, and everyone said, you need to enjoy this time because you're not ever going to get this again, because then you'll fall into another job and you'll be working full time, and then this time will be over. But that time of being between jobs when I didn't know what I was going to, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will have experienced this, that your time is just filled with the anxiety of not knowing where you're going and you can't sit back and enjoy that time. And you start to kind of drift because you haven't got a sense of purpose or a sense of focus about where you're going. And I know for myself, in order to feel anchored and secure in the world, I need to know where I'm going. I don't mind if I take the long way there or the scenic route, but I do need to know where I'm going. Otherwise, I can't relax.
Oh, I'm going to have to wind this up. Thank you so much. I know you've got a little gift for our audience. Have you got just a minute to tell them what that is?
Yes. Well, as I said earlier, I look after women who've got burnout, who've got adrenal fatigue, who are getting messed up hormones and messed up thyroids and messed up digestions and everything because they've been busy and stressed for too long. So I've put together a free quiz. It's called the Adrenal Health Check, and it just takes you through a series of quick questions to just show you your risk of burnout and how far along that path you might be. And then after you've done the quiz, you'll get some emails with some pointers about how you can actually come back from that place as well. So it's just a good wake-up call, along with some really easy to implement pointers to start looking after you again, because so many of us forget to do that.
Awesome, Jules. Thank you so much. I'm going to dive in and do the quiz. I'm curious.
Let me know what you get.
or not. Thanks so much, Jules. It's been awesome to have this time with you again. And yeah, so for the women that want to tune in and learn more from you, there is that gift. But what's your website? What's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, you can find me at julesgalloway.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Jules Galloway Health, or you can check out my podcast on iTunes called Straight Talking Natural Health. And then keep an eye out around the traps, because I've got a new business starting up very, very soon called Parks Avenue Dispensary, and that's in Byron Bay.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks so much, Jules. All right, bye for now.
Thanks for having me.